thanks for coming out. Or thanks
Thank
for
you,
letting me
Joe.
come out today.
Appreciate it.
Let me talk the interview and just gather all this wonderful information about food and beverage and how that connects with event planning. So we have Bob Weil on my right. He's the food and beverage manager at Longboat Key Club, and we have Ayla Goggin, the event director of Longboat Key Club. So let's start off with just a quick intro about yourself, and then we'll get into these questions that I've prepared. So Ayla, just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go to Bob.
Yeah, so I have been here at the Longboat Key Club for about 5 years in events. Prior to that, I was actually a restaurant manager, so I came from food and beverage, which is how Bob and I know each other. We started on the food and beverage side, and it kind of grew from there. But I went to Johnson & Wales University, so I have a degree in culinary arts, bachelor's in food service management, and my master's in business. And hospitality is a great industry, and you have the ability to kind of go from one thing to the next if it fits. And I love people and parties, so events really was a good fit for me. And you talk about food and beverage, so that's basically me in a nutshell.
Excellent. That's perfect. Thanks, Ayla. Bob.
So, I'm a 40-year veteran of the hospitality industry. I started out on back of the house, was a chef for the first 25 years of that period of time, and I moved into food and beverage operations. In that time, I've had the good fortune of working on the hotel side, the club side, freestanding restaurants. I've worked just about every position on the hospitality side, whether it's been through events to culinary. And
Way to one up me, that's nice.
Well, just been doing it a little longer, that's all. After time, you'll get there. But, to Ayla's point, it's a passion and a love, and
you don't do it if you don't love it.
Exactly. You don't do it if you don't love it. But
perfect.
So,
thank you.
Thanks,
two just great experts here on this, so we're lucky to have you both here. Wonderful. So let's get right into it. So with any type of event, whenever you hear the word event or something's happening, there always seems to be some kind of food and beverage component involved. How big of a role, and by that I mean maybe sort of the margin percentage, how big of a role does food and beverage play in the overall picture of an entire event?
I know for me it oftentimes varies with whatever the type of event is. So if it's something where, you'd mentioned that you've done things with forks and corks in the past, where it's obviously a key role to it, but each individual restaurant or facility is making an item. It's not coming from one property as a whole. I feel like for us, we do a lot of social events, but we do a lot of corporate, which means that I may have a meeting going on and all they have is beverages, and that's it, which means I'm getting a room rental fee from them, and food and beverage may not play as large of a role in that particular style. But if it's a social event, celebration of life, a birthday, a wedding, that's like the main component. And a lot of times when people book here with us, they take that into consideration. They want it to be a good quality product. They're willing to pay for something that's a quality product, but that's a huge role. They don't want something for their family or friends to not be good. So as far as whenever I'm talking to a couple, for example, I would say the money that they put towards the venue is usually about 50% of their budget overall for food and beverage and rental and everything.
Wow. And like you said, it varies from event to event. Yeah, absolutely. What's the typical food cost, or I guess average food cost for an event, F&B event, I guess specifically this property?
From a general side, I would say if I just had to give an average, not looking at the mix of what we consider a social event versus a group event, I'd say somewhere for us in the low 20s.
Okay, excellent. It's good to know. Yeah, we always sort of talk about in restaurant management the restaurant food cost, but it's a little bit different, typically lower as you're describing with the events,
for us,
which is
our
good.
profit's higher in events for banquet revenue than it would be in a restaurant. So.
Got it. I remember when I was at a resort, all the events and banquets and catering at the Hyatt sort of paid for being able to play in some of the fine dining restaurants.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
far less variables.
So you were talking about corporate events, meetings, and there's different types of events. So what would you say is most profitable? Meaning, we know there's plated events. There might be a standard buffet, maybe a buffet with action stations, indoor, outdoor, box lunches, stuff like that. What's a real profitable? When an event comes in, you say, man, that's going to be a really good event for us.
I would be interested to see if your interest is different than mine. I feel like in general, if you're just looking at food component of it, I'm going to say a plated dinner is probably going to be your most profitable because we have to put more food out for a buffet or a station or something along those lines. So I would say that probably is, but I will tell you that at this point in time, we've been doing a lot of station events. It's very popular, especially for social, because people like being able to move around. But when I see those come in, I'm like, oh, this will be a fun party. This is going to be a lot, you have this many people coming, they want people up and moving around. But I feel like profit-wise, it's probably going to be plated.
Yeah, excellent. And now, do you allow, when you meet a client or a guest, do you allow them to customize any portion of it or all of it, or is there a pre-selected choice depending on the theme? And then we can kind of throw that in there too, as far as themes, would they help customize that, or do you already have pre-selected themes?
A lot comes from the client itself. We do have things pre-built, so we have a variety of different like theme buffets, theme dinners, and that kind of thing. Wedding package is usually more of a generic thing because couples don't normally want like a tiki themed wedding. They want, a fine plated meal or a variety, something that could encompass a lot of different types of people and what they eat. But yes, and we have a lot of fun themed things with different corporate groups that we do where, one wants a casino night, and so they're bringing in different tables and all the food's themed around that. Or we did a Havana Nights themed event. We've done a lot of circus themed events where people have tented the inside of the ballroom to make it look like a tent, and do food that's themed around the circus. So I think that those kinds of things are a lot of fun, and if a client comes at us and is like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, we're like, great, let's play! And we'll talk to our chef, we'll work together to come up with something that's themed to go for that. But flexibility-wise, we can do pretty much anything.
I'm sure Ed likes that too. I used to always like
something fun.
having stuff.
It does, and again, for us, as long as you're watching, you're watching cost, you're understanding expense. For us, as an operation, we're a little bit different than a freestanding hotel or a vertical hotel per se. We spread over 500 acres, so there's a lot more added labor, cost of doing business that is unseen, that you have to be careful of. It's great to create, but understanding those margins, understanding what it takes and the cost it takes to go on an endeavor like that or create an event like that. So
people have to be willing to pay for it.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a free customization. By any means.
So to answer the point about the plated versus the buffet, yes, there are, if it is a rule of thumb in general, I would say that a plated is always going to be. But there are other scenarios where you end up with breakage on an event, doing better with a small customized buffet than you would typically for something else.
Exactly. I remember when you and I first met and I first moved here and discovered even out west when I was living out there, and then on the east coast of Florida, I've heard of Longboat Key Club is world renowned. It's a beautiful place, destination. Beauty, but I remember when I moved here and drove around, I was like, oh my God, there's nothing like this as far as it being spread out. I remember you told me, you said, Joe, everything we do in banquet and catering, like 90% of it, I'm not sure if that was the exact percentage, but is a cater out, leaving the building. Right. So that's challenging, right?
Yeah.
We jokingly, our banquet manager jokingly calls it the land of the 40-minute fork.
Absolutely.
If you lose something, if you forget something, it's going to take you 40 minutes to go get it.
Yeah.
So our business model is vastly different than a lot of other operations because of the size and scope and layout of the property.
Exactly. And for people listening, students listening, what we mean by that is your typical resort event, even convention center, it's all under in one building and one lot. Unlike here, Longboat Key Club, where it's literally miles away from one event space to the next space. Yeah. Now, the guests that come in that work with you and plan these menus, do they often want to see the chef, or is that just something you kind of download to him later?
I usually download to him later. If we're doing a tasting, he usually comes out and we'll talk with them. But for the most part, I handle that communication for him. Just because I'm working with the client majority of the time, and if you're able to streamline it and have one or two contacts for them, they get less confused.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a really good point that Ayla brings up, and Ayla mentioned in her short bio that she had spent time in operations, and especially in food and beverage operations. It's important that your acumen in this part includes a strong food and beverage background, not only a basic understanding of operations, but also food.
Yeah.
I think that's sometimes missed. I want to come and plan an event. I want to make pretty things, but we forget that there's a a lot of information and a lot of things that have to be shared and understood with a client that as an event professional you need to have at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when I'm looking for people to put into those positions, when we're hiring for those positions, I'm looking for someone who has a strong background in operations, first and foremost. I think you have to have a natural skill and a natural love of events, as you can see in Eden. I mean, in Ayla's enthusiasm, but at the end of the day, that strong understanding of it, I don't have to go through and explain to her. She understands.
Yeah.
She understands the limits.
Yeah. So many of you listening have jobs that are in operations, front of the house, back of the house. That's so valuable as they're describing, because having that just makes it it's a quicker track, I think, for you to move up. You can't just jump. You can't just graduate with no experience and jump into a management position at F&B. You have to have that. And I think maybe that's because you, Bob, you always have this passion and you love talking about it. And I think a lot of maybe the reason why you've been working here for so long and enjoying it is because of your ability to deal with stress, because you've been in it. You've been an executive chef. You had, and Ayla's had operational experience.
Restaurant managers are fun.
That's powerful. That's powerful. I can't stress that enough. Now, what are the strategies in attempting to maybe optimize the revenue once you're meeting with the client, designing it, and sort of upselling, maybe having add-on services? I mean, is that sort of in your mindset the whole time?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, anything. I mean, so from my side of point of view, when I'm taking a client from the beginning, so when they inquire with us for an event, when they're touring the resort, when we're talking about menus throughout, when they come for a tasting, we kind of take that into consideration all the time. So when I'm touring you and you're, say, touring for a wedding as an example, I'm going to show you wedding venues and, oh, you want a ceremony on the beach? That's so wonderful. As we walk by the pool deck, you know what would be really awesome is if you had a welcome party here the night before. Like, you could have hors d'oeuvres late night. It'd be something, it's a great central location. You could have more of your guests come than if you were just to do a rehearsal dinner. They didn't ask me for a welcome party. It's not something they were interested in, but they wouldn't necessarily even thought about it. I have a lot of clients who come who want something that's on a lawn or not near the beach at all, but they like this area because we're Gulf front. Okay, well, let's do a beach barbecue the night before, because they may not want that for the wedding, but to them, that's like this special thing that they never thought of that they could do here. So from the initial point of them coming, it's like planting little seeds of things they could possibly do. Then even moving on from that, we can do after parties. So that's something that has been a huge upsell lately, that they wouldn't have normally thought that they could do. Our restaurants close at 9, a brunch. So at the beginning, we kind of lay a lot of those things, but then when we do a tasting, a lot of times Bob will select a couple of our higher tiered wines to have them try too, because that might just be something, if they have it, they'd be interested in learning more about it. Late night snacks, extra dessert stations. Those are all things that are considered fun in the world of a couple that they wouldn't have in a wedding package normally, but they're like, oh, I can add wings and fries? Like, this sounds great. So for me, it's something, I always tell Bob this, and I kind of joke around about it. I never view myself as a salesperson, really. I like food, and I love the resort. So for me, I couldn't sell cars. I couldn't describe it to you. I don't have a passion for it. But for this, it's like, let's plan this awesome event and let's make it great. So I think whenever you're talking to a client, it's getting them just as excited and enthusiastic about it as you are. And for me, that's the easiest sales tool you could use.
Right. That's a great answer.
Yeah, because it's not about the hard sell for us here.
No.
Even when I'm involved with the client, it's about exposing them to what we can do and what our capabilities are, and that generally opens the door to increasing, increasing our revenue in those areas.
It's so funny. It kind of tells me how long I've been out of the actual on the ground stuff, because you guys are talking about this memorable experience and exposing them, and I'm thinking, you're actually educating these clients, but I think that's a better way to describe it.
Yeah,
right now you're
the Glenn Ross kind of ABC is a little out the door.
Right. Yeah, you're not hard selling.
Because that'll immediately turn someone off. You want to get them swept up in. These are the things that we can do. This is the fun.
What's the vibe of your event? How do you want your guests to feel? And I think that's for your Gen Z, your late millennial, I guess, late millennial and your Gen Z couple. or a person who's hosting an event, they want to build a relationship with the person that they're interacting with. Because for me, it's about, oh, I felt connected to Ayla. They may love the resort, but they felt connected to me. They like me as a person. So having that connection, they're willing to pay, willing to pay for a product, even if it's more, but they don't necessarily always want something deemed as luxury, because that to them seems frivolous, but high quality. They want their guests to have a good experience. It's not necessarily like, here's what I've offered you. It's, oh wait, this tent was unveiled and I came in at this time. Oh, there were fire pits and s'mores on the beach. My guests had a good experience.
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with aesthetics and the feeling of an event rather than necessarily
Individual components.
Yeah, individual components.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You're just describing the key to hospitality and what we talk about in our intro to hospitality course, which and I know a lot of you are not hospitality majors, but one thing we talk about in intro to hospitality is creating memorable moments.
Sure.
We say that about 1,000 times in that course.
Disney says that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what you're doing. I mean, you're just really trying to improve that memory for them.
Absolutely. I mean, with anything that we do here from a hospitality aspect, whether it's in events or just anything in our operations, it's a guest first mentality. It's always about the guest. Yep. How are we improving the guest experience? What are we doing for the guest? What is the guest feeling when they're here? It's part of being hospitable, and it's part about being, being a hospitality organization.
Yeah.
So,
and something that plays into that too. I mean, you have to think, as much as it matters to them and their guests that they have a good experience. There's been times where a wedding ends, and then I don't know, 6 or 7 months go by, and I have people start to reach out to me who attended the event, who are like, my daughter just got engaged, and I really I went to so and so's wedding, and I think it would be fantastic. And I'd really like to go. I've had it where I've gotten 5 tours out of one wedding from their guests going to it. So Absolutely. It's just as important for us that those people have a good experience and us protecting the service and everything that they get as than the couple themselves.
The ultimate word of mouth, right? Because they've been to the event and they've experienced it.
Absolutely.
And they want to.
It's how reputations are built.
Fantastic. Yep. So it sounds like it could be pretty. So I'm thinking like a chef now. This could be a lot of moving parts. Could be pretty complex events. Do you have like a daily meeting with F&B or with chef or with Bob? Is it daily, weekly, or like reading BOs and things like that?
Weekly right now. There are a lot of hotels that are single tower hotels that do have daily BEO meetings. Because we're so spread out, it just doesn't make sense. So we talk all the time. Like, don't get me wrong. I feel like I have chef on speed dial, but we don't meet every day.
The communication is there almost on a continuous basis.
We talk a lot.
And that's and for us, if you ask me what is the one thing that we're able to conquer the space with and how we manage the space, it's through communication. It starts with the events and running all the information through our information systems like Delphi. But again, nothing supersedes the connection between the staff, the ability to pick up the phone, to be, to reach out to someone and get the chefs here, or, make an adjustment on a dime.
Right.
And that's what we all do. Everyone is here for the guest experience, whether it's me, or it's the chef or banquet manager, whomever. We're there, whether we're on property or not, to ensure that event goes well or that guest is having that optimum experience. It's so that communication is ongoing. The fact that we have a formal meeting once a week is important, because that's the time when we all can compress and have FaceTime and be able to answer more questions. But it's just continuous. The stream of information here is ongoing.
What's nice about it, though, I think, even to play on that, is that I think I may look at something in a certain way, and you do this enough, you try to catch the little things that could go wrong, or try to mitigate what the guest's expectation is. So it's not like, I'm expecting this to be something that it's not. But our banquet manager, our chef, Bob, they all look at things in a different view than I do. So if I have my banquet manager come up to me and say, hey, I saw this banquet event order, I can't do that many people in that particular setting. Can we try tweaking it like this instead? He's going to always be looking out for the guest experience, but it may not have been something that I caught because I'm not used to setting up that certain way, or whatever it may be. So I think that that's also helpful, because even, chef, hey, how are you expecting us to do this? What did you sell? Because I want to make sure that I'm showing what that needs
Right,
to be.
yeah.
So I think that, I mean, that communication happen.
Yeah,
Number
it comes
one,
down to finalizing the interpretation to get
Yeah.
the actual result.
I know we've talked about this a lot. You know, over promising, under delivering. That's the ultimate.
Oh, it's the ultimate sin.
Manage
sin, ultimate
expectations.
sin. Yeah, absolutely.
The biggest
Yeah,
part
you're
of
always
all
managing
events.
expectations,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, that's probably the thing that I bring to the table is managing the
Managing
expectation.
Yep. Yep. All right. Good case. So let's picture you have an event. It's a big one. There's a lot of moving parts to it. You know, I like to call these things critical control points, sort of like in the kitchen where you're
Sure.
worried about sanitation, but with an event, as far as event management goes, these critical control points where if you're not aware of it or have some way to mitigate it or a best practice to maybe alleviate something or stop something from happening, it could be bad. So, and I'm thinking of some examples here. So where things could go bad, such as, you know, the wrong counts or equipment failure or staffing challenges, supply issues, weather. What are some of the best practices on mitigating some of these? And you don't need to go through all of them, but just pick a few.
I mean, I'll just go right now. It's prior proper planning with all those things. I mean, it's really anticipating that you're going to have inclement weather, that you possibly are going to have a staffing issue. So
Right.
that part almost becomes seamless. We know that if someone is not going to show, it's, you know, what is the plan? We always have a plan B with that.
Yeah.
I think where most events struggle is on the logistics side. Whether it be how we execute the meal, the timing of the meal, making sure there's communication day of event. The other one is, and what people don't look for, if you're looking at a large event, is the logistics of the event and the flow of the event. And looking at the layout of the event. If you're managing 1,000 people, how am I getting them into that space? How am I getting them out of that space? How am I turning the room? How am I presenting the room?
Yeah.
What is the cadence of events through the evening? How am I executing? How many people will I need to execute? So it's all those things up front, asking them, how am I getting them in? How am I getting them out? Where are they parking? How am I getting them to park? All those things, going through all those things. So again, you know, to Ayla's point, that's something where I would start probably in a big event when we have an OPL event or a Bacchus event where we may have 12, 13, 1,400 people. I will start with that part of the process. What's the overall feeling? What's the kind of the general plan? And then see if it's even physically possible to execute the event, and then go through the steps.
And there's things that like we've turned down because we couldn't like execute it the way that we
Right.
thought that it should be executed.
And then asking your question, is it financially feasible to do an event like that? To that point, you got to, you know, what are going to be the dollars that we can do it? And again, managing an expectation. Is this something that we, you know, the number may be great, the revenue may be outstanding, but
All
if we
those
can't
people
do
are
it,
happy.
if we can't do it, you know, it's no sense in putting your reputation on the line.
Absolutely.
I don't know that I've ever walked away from that at this point,
Yeah.
because we have the good fortune of having a great team, but you have to look at those things.
Yeah.
So that to me is really where most events fail. Is really at that beginning stage, or what are you capable of, and what are you and do you understand the logistics of the event?
Can you pull it off? Yeah.
Can you pull it off? For us, it's all about logistics every day. I mean, I'm managing food from one location to the other. All of our food is done in a production kitchen, in a commissary for production here, and then it's sent all over property. So if I'm sending it to 10 different locations on any course of the day,
If there's an accident in the Gulf of Mexico and the car can't get by,
how do we get through?
How do you get the food
I mean,
around?
we actually have a plan for that.
so there's
You do.
and there's
I
little
mean,
things
yeah.
that it's like even on like the weather scope. Okay, if I'm looking at it that week out, we've created a backup floor plan. We've talked about what the plan A and B and C options are. Okay, well the day of comes, we're checking the weather.
And the guest has
entire
been
time.
educated
The
at
guest
that.
has been educated on
That's
it.
good.
So it's like for that one component, you know, we've talked to every moving part, the vendors that are coming in to do that. Does the setup team have time to execute what's
Yeah.
needed? And I think, but that's just, you know, one component of
I
it.
think you hit on something that's key too. Is not that you're making excuses, but you have to. The guests sort of have to know how things are managed. You don't want to make excuses, but if something happens, that's
And it's still, when you go with that guest first approach, you don't want to be out if a windstorm comes up on the beach with all your guests. It's going to be a fiasco. You paint the reality of it to them so that they understand, and then it's generally an easy move. That person's generally going to make that move. Even the most stubborn bride doesn't want to have a downpour on her wedding day.
Right.
You know, they want to go to them and make it right. And if you can show them the alternative and have them understand it, it generally becomes. But that's really a lot of it, because once the event is started, it's like a giant snowball. Once the snowball starts rolling down the hill, it just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
You're not going to control it the day of the event. It's really about
Preparation.
Yeah,
You know?
It's like, I think that all of our different departments and how it all works together, because you have to think, I've been talking to this person probably for at least a year, if not longer. So for me, that's a whole year of talking to them about all the different things that either A, can go wrong or happen or what they're expecting. I have some people that email me every single day, multiple times a day, and some that don't talk to me as often. But I've had so much communication with them on the front end that by the time it gets to our team, they're executing what's there and executing what's happening, but they're now trying to take everything that I've said and create what's been asked for. So I think that like the amount of communication throughout the entire process is huge.
Yeah.
And I may have been staring at it in this little window for how long, so to then have it get to that portion
all the
of it.
different strategies and protocols and mitigation and having plan A, plan B, C, D. I mean, it's almost like every day is a military campaign for you guys.
Absolutely.
You
It's
know,
all
and
logistics.
And Julie, the author of the textbook that I use and I love, it's fantastic. I just switched it to it, and she brings that up a couple times. It's like military strategy.
Yeah.
It's very much.
You're very much, it's all logistics. So if you're managing an army, that's what you're doing.
Exactly. Okay, so we talked about over promising and under delivering, and so that sort of brings me to this other cardinal sin, and I'm sure there's a simple answer, but if you could just give me maybe some detail on how do you deal with, or how do you avoid running out of food, or having way too much food, so both sides, you know, what is that just something that the chef knows how to do from event to event, or do you think there's a specific strategy? Yeah, Bob.
Well, sure, but each event is different, and you're looking at how. So it really starts at the very beginning, when you're doing the menu planning, when you're doing and you're actually doing what we call the menu engineering, when you're really looking at what's the recipe, what's the breakdown, how you know what are my production modules for that, and then really looking at it. Then it comes to the ordering piece, and then executing. There's some rules of thumb that we always put in. 5% over from a production standpoint, but really, and it comes from a little bit from instinct or prior knowing, and that is, hey, I know that nobody really eats 2 shrimp per person. There's one person that's going to eat 5, and there may be only one person does it. So you understand that, and you factor that in. You not only factor that in when you're ordering it, but you factor that in when you're pricing.
Yeah.
So you have padding on your cost, and you also have an understanding on the other side when it comes to executing, purchasing, and having enough product day of.
Yeah.
If you're scrambling day of, it's done. It's a lost cause. So that planning, when the chef is doing that, literally breaking the things down from ounces to pounds and understanding yields and all that stuff. That's part of being a chef.
Yeah.
That's why we always say there's a difference between a cook and a chef. Somebody can be a terrific cook and put beautiful food on a plate, but if he's a chef is measured by how much money he makes.
Can they make that beautiful dish 100 times in a row?
And exactly.
Yeah.
So, but also understand what it costs to do that.
Absolutely.
And so, understanding those things are a big play in that.
You said it right as I was thinking it, is that experience, sort of like instinct, and the more experience a chef or a food and beverage team has with that, the better. And I used to always think of it as like a game. It was a fun game, and,
Sure.
and when we nailed it, a count or something, or had very little left, and it was a success. It was like winning something was a prize.
Right, and there's also the optics of that too. Is that you build in on the front side is, you don't want to run it so tight that there was 2 pieces left in the chafing dish, or 2 pieces left on the buffet, and the father of the bride who paid $200 a head is like, well, what the heck's this?
Right.
You also want to make it so that so you have to really understand that part of it. And understand the value in what you're putting out there as well.
Right. Yeah, I remember a chef told me a long time ago, and you might chuckle at this, is like, some of the proteins you can, if you're running out, you can quickly get them on and cook them and get them out. And he's like, never, ever, ever run out of starch.
Starch, yeah.
Because it could take a half hour, an hour, you know, and you can't. Yeah, so
It's funny because
funny.
when you're saying like menu engineering side of things, you know, when we build a buffet, for example, I've had a lot. You'll have corporate clients who are like, "Oh, well, if I took this, this, and this out, will that lower my price?" No, because we build those things in there to make sure that you don't eat 17 million pounds of chicken, that you are spread out amongst the other salads and things that are there.
Bingo.
And similar to how a buffet is set up, whenever you're coming up to a buffet, you don't put your meat first, because then they're going to eat everything right away. So there's, I mean, not only from the ordering side and what chef has to do to make sure that's right, but it's their expectation of, here's the experience that your guest is having.
Right.
This is the items on your buffet, and then even how the setup
So many
plays
great
out.
strategies. Yeah, we used to always like to kind of show if the price allowed and the menu allowed, we would kind of showcase the desserts, so they would see the desserts. Well, maybe I won't eat so much steak, so I want to save room for dessert.
Desserts.
If it's a buffet, yeah, that's awesome, great stuff. So staffing. I mean, I met Maria and I talked to Bob a lot about just the challenges of the staff. So, but to specifically with the front of the house person who you're training, let's say you have a new front of the house person that just starts tomorrow, and you're training them with the 3 events. How long? And again, it's sort of almost too general of a question, but how long do you think it would take them, the typical new hire, before they could then maybe lead or captain an event?
Are you talking about from a service perspective, or
Yes.
or in an event management position?
Okay, let's say front of the house server,
Server.
like a banquet server.
So and again, each person is different, but if we're just talking about someone, just a frontline person with 2 to 3 years of fine dining service for us, they go through almost a 2-week training period.
Okay.
That would be just to be doing service on the floor.
Yeah.
To be a banquet captain for us, you'd have to have prior captain experience, and then it would probably still take you several months before you were captaining on a full-time basis for us. We're very blessed here. We have very little turnover with our banquet staff. I have most of my banquet captains range. I think the one with the least tenure is Renee, and he's almost 10 years. The other ones are 40 and 20. So again, we do have some folks that are kind of up and coming, but again, it's a maturation process. It really is. Our expectation here with our client the bar has been set pretty high, so we have to take that seriously. But usually at least a year or two with prior experience. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's so important to keep. And you have a very low turnover rate. This club environment, it's beautiful. But if you were to lose a captain or somebody a key, that's why it's so important.
That person has been here for a while. Yes.
Yep.
That replaces them.
Now, with the training, with new hires, any position that's hired on at Longboat Key, are there any credos or philosophy that you try to distill into them or talk about during orientation?
Yeah. It comes down to what I said to you: guess first. We start with that, and if you start making all your decisions based on guess first, we can hone you down to making the better decisions as you go. But if you start out with that, no matter where you are, whether you're a steward or working in the food storeroom, or you're a line cook or server or whatever, back of the house, front of the house, doesn't matter. If you're making your decisions based on a guest first scenario, then ultimately you're going to make the right decision.
I think that's a philosophy to me. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So if we're taking care of that guest, if that decision was made with the objective of taking care of the guest, then everything else is minutia. We fine tune it. In any operation, you have things that don't go as smoothly. As long as the guest does not experience that, we can correct that on the backside.
Yeah.
I mean, there's sometimes some things are easier to correct than others, and some take a little bit more time. Obviously training comes into those things, and communication is always a critical piece. But you can put up 100 quotes or 100 steps of service, but if you really start out with that one decision, you're going to make that right decision as you go along. Because it's never, for us here, with as varied a situation we have with the property, it is quite honestly, impossible to prepare everyone for every situation, because they're in so many dynamic situations. You're in a club member situation, you're in a guest situation, you're in an owner situation, you're in an event situation, you're in an outlet situation. There's so many different variables for an employee, but if they're put with that piece in front of them,
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the ultimate. Philosophy that they need to keep in mind. Yeah,
that guest is taken care of.
Sense. Yeah.
If there was a step of service that was taken out of place,
Yeah.
we need to train, we need to correct, we need
Exactly.
to coach. But that guest leaves happy, ultimately we've done our job.
That's a perfect transition, because I guess one of my last questions is, and I've been to events here and always been impressed by just the greeting and the communication and the kind of interplay between guests and staff. And do you do any kind of role playing with that as far as how to greet a guest, how they converse with an irritated client? How do you train that, or how do you do?
Well, there's different. We do different training seminars throughout the year.
Okay.
Where we reinforce certain things like that. There are very clear steps in our handbook on the food, and there's a specific food and beverage handbook that lays everything out that you need to know on a technical standpoint. So with that, like if you have an irritated guest or there are protocols that immediately come into play, and a lot of them involve getting a senior person or a senior manager involved immediately.
There you go.
So that takes the pressure off them. Most times in a service situation, and I'll tell my servers this, I don't want you to handle the negative. You're here to make that guest happy. So you shouldn't be handling the irritated guest beyond the point of, hey, I'm sorry you didn't like that, let me get you something different. But that immediately should be transferred to a manager, so that if the situation were to escalate, it's in a controlled environment where that server now is still focused on, because it's a hard enough job to take care of people in general. They're focused on taking care of those guests. They're not left to have to do that, to have to deal with the negativity. That becomes the manager's role, or a senior supervisor, or a senior floor
You
person.
probably have consistent results from that too.
Yeah, I mean, generally that's what it is, and most of our staff. I mean, and again, that doesn't mean that there will be an interaction from time to time that's not great, but they know right away to come to that senior team member to assist them.
Fantastic. Well, I can't thank you enough. Amazing little quick session here. We got a lot of knowledge we just kind of dragged out of you guys, and you two, and I really appreciate all the thoughtful comments and solutions. Ayla, anything else to add, or Bob?
Oh, I don't
No?
think so. No.
Yeah.
If there obviously was questions or anything,
Yeah.
you can reach out. So.
No, I like the format. This is pretty good.
Good.
I know a lot of different questions from different angles, but I think they're going to get a lot out of this. So
Good.
that's it.
Our pleasure.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank
Good
you
to
so
see you
much.
again.